Jeanine, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jason. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Jason. Wow, I'm just going to be honest with you. Those films were pretty powerful, inspiring, a bit taking your breath away, but I think it was incredibly inspiring to understand how people and younger generations are really looking at the effects of climate change and exactly how fashion can be a catalyst in that. So today we're here. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I really appreciate your time with all of the busy schedules that we have. This is Climate Week. We're in the middle of the UNGA. We are kicking it off. We have all of the heads of states from all around the world kind of blocking the city streets of New York, and we're all trying to do our best and do our jobs here right now to try to really shine more light and push the agenda of climate change, climate crisis. We're at code red. According to the Secretary General of the United Nations, we are at code red. That was last year. We're even further. So we're here today. We're going to really talk about what we can do. You saw all of the really interesting communications, takes, how people see sustainable fashion and how they're trying to communicate it out. So I'm actually going to talk with Paul first. Paul is currently working as artist in residence at Yale University, the Center of Collaborative Arts and Media. And I kind of want to get your take, Paul, because, I mean, you saw many of the films and where we are right now with the current climate change, all of this UN delegations in town. And we understand, and I'll get to everybody later, is that really we're still not impacting the fashion industry in general. What can we do with regard to media, films, music? What can we do to really communicate it to the rest of the world?
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, thank you everyone for coming out. I realize it's always just a treat to actually be in a room with fellow human beings post-pandemic. One thing that the pandemic really made us realize was the power of presence. When you feel like you're in a context with other human beings, generating culture, generating change. And one of the things that struck me during the pandemic was the way social media really went into warp drive. Now, what does this have to do with fashion? Well, here's why. Most of the issues that one could argue the last maybe 5 to 7 years have been kind of looking at the evolution of a data-driven society into a frame of reference that deals with digital media at every level. So one could argue algorithms have basically transformed the political discourse, the cultural discourse, where you get your food, where you think about your gas, when you pay rent, when you deal with insurance. It's all algorithm-driven. And one thing that the pandemic really brought home to roost is that the financial and cultural mechanisms of how we think about late capitalism have really transformed the sense of being an individual stakeholder. So, for example, high net worth individuals during the pandemic, I'll give you an amusing example of philanthropy. Mackenzie Bezos, who's Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, she donated the most amount of money to historically black colleges, but she made the money back within 2 months. She donated like $4 billion to historically black universities, made the money back because of the stock market in the middle of the pandemic. So you're seeing this idea of generational wealth. You're seeing the idea that how the middle class in America, this illusion of social transformation, financially, socially, and so on, we really are at a crisis, not just of thinking about the environment, but also the crisis of democracy, the crisis of access to health and other issues that one could argue set the tone for design. So design can intervene in the everyday world to change things for the better. One could argue your average person now lives better than an emperor would have lived in Rome 2,000 years ago. You have heat, you have hot water, you have access to food easily. Your clothing is better than even a king would have had in the Middle Ages. Meanwhile, cotton, many of the other materials that go into our clothing, then on the other end of the spectrum, the sheer volume of clothing that we throw away, these are all things that are really sort of, where you're saying code red. Your average American throws away about 80 to 90 pounds of clothes a year. And in fact, so many countries have been taking secondhand clothing from the US, whether you go to Ghana, Chile, they actually have huge mountains of clothing. In fact, in Ghana, they call it dead white man's clothing. And in fact, they've had to turn away trash and stuff like that because the sheer volume of clothing.
Yeah, some interesting things are coming out of that too.
Right.
So I'm going to just take that because I really love where this is going. And maybe, Dr. Dorsey, you could maybe, this is Dr. Michael Dorsey, by the way, as an environmental scientist and also in finance, where do you really see some of this unlock and change that could really happen in the consumer space as well?
Sure, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out. Very much appreciated. And apologies, I'll have to go after I give a few brief comments.
Yes.
So thank you for giving me that chance. So I think there was a wonderful metaphor in the elation short.
Yes, I agree.
We saw the evolution in that short, if you weren't watching it. Hopefully you were. And what did she say? The background was, even in the mess, everything has a place. Even in the mess of these white men's clothes, in the mess of just the waste and profligate race and proliferation of fast fashion, even in the mess, everything has a place. So I think there's two big things that we need to sort of focus our minds on, particularly as we're here in the midst of, actually three big things. One critical thing for some in the room, and two other things. Especially as we're here in the midst of the UN General Assembly and Climate Week. One is that there will be a fight, right? So there's going to be a fight. And some of you on this panel and some folks in the films are at the forefront of that fight. That's trying to push this industry to clean itself up, to take responsibility, to not continue this sort of waste that it's sort of known and specializes in. Why is it going to be a fight? Some of you know that basic line. Many of the big houses, many of the big trade associations, the Italian Trade Association, the French Association, Committee Colbert, the Camera Nazionale de Moda Italiana in Italy, and others, they were pushing back quietly, even against sanctions for Russia, against Russia, right? So the idea that they're down with war, just imagine if what it means to be pro-pollution, pro-waste. So there's going to be a fight. If people are going to be pro-war and pro-death, they're absolutely going to be pro-pollution and things that we might call or think of as less than war, okay? So we shouldn't forget that. This is a battle. This is a fight. But at the same time, I think there's an opportunity. Let's call it resistance might be fertile. There's growth and a ground to gain in that fight. I think at the high end, we should be thinking about potentially the sanctions pathway. We've seen resistance there in terms of the war, but there's opportunities there, I think, in other things in terms of climate, in terms of pollution. There's also opportunities to hold brands accountable, to hold retailers accountable, to basically shine and shame those that aren't coming along sustainably. And I think there's an opportunity for folks in the room, particularly some of the First Ladies. When I was told that you all have had that conversation with the First Lady, some here whom are here, I thought back to 1933. Some of you probably don't know what happened in 1933. There was, I see some nods there. There was a nice Easter egg roll, and the First Lady of the US, Eleanor Roosevelt, she put on trousers for the first time at a formal event. So I think there's an opportunity for the First Ladies in particular, and also some of these First Gentlemen, but since we're talking about First Ladies and talking with First Ladies, there's an opportunity to be first in sustainability, to showcase that first. And that shouldn't be underestimated. It sounds almost petty and coy to think that, oh, women wore pants. But that was a huge, huge thing, almost a century ago. So there's an opportunity for those of us that have power to be first and to lead. And it's going to be critical doing that in the midst of the fighting as well as in the midst of some of the breakthroughs.
And Michael, I just want to jump in on that for just a second, because these days it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. And so, eerily enough, how every piece of clothing we wear, generally, if you did a kind of a forensic analysis on where it, and this is probably leading to something that actually, you have a fashion company where you can track all of the inputs. So the dyes, the materials, the plastics, fossil fuel-based stuff like nylon, polyester, and so on. We're in a revolution of materials. You can do what they call bioremediation, for example, mushrooms. There's now a movement for mushroom leather. There's stuff where people are doing stuff with algae. People are beginning to innovate around materials in the same way that we can now think about every crisis is a kind of an opportunity for innovation. And I think that I firmly believe that we have solutions at hand. The problem is the bottleneck. And the bottleneck generally is about policy. It's about the sort of the compression of how people think about profit and playing out the long term. So oil companies, for example, were heavily involved with propaganda about your carbon footprint. In fact, even the term carbon footprint was coined by British Petroleum to sort of offset their carbon emissions onto individuals. So individuals, we barely deal with carbon emissions as much as a corporation. But at the same time, these are things what Michael was just talking about. I think we're in a really intriguing area of innovation, and that's where probably Alsha might have some thoughts.
And go ahead, Michael.
And that's why I'll have to say thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the panel.
Michael,
Thanks.
thank you so much. I'm sorry we got delayed. So yes, back to fashion brands. And Aslaug, Magnusdottir is one of the biggest leading activists and business women in this space. And I'd really like to talk to you about, we've seen all of this. You have really made big strides in how we can really start building sustainable brands. What's the first action?
Yeah, so I have worked in the fashion industry a long time, and over the last years in particular, really been looking at what is the industry doing to address these problems, and I came to the conclusion that we're just not doing enough. We don't have a clear enough plan. Most businesses don't. And I felt, and I approach this as an entrepreneur in the industry who wants to try to innovate and come up with new practical solutions for the industry to really solve these problems. I think one of the biggest impact areas is one that's very often neglected in the conversation in the industry. It's starting to come up more and more. There has been a lot of focus on fabrics, which is great and is extremely important. There's been a lot of discussion about circularity. The overproduction of fashion that happens up front
yes, the amount of
is
overproduction.
so neglected. So
Yes.
there are over 100 billion garments created in the world every year. 30 to 40 billion of those garments never needed to be made.
No.
Because they aren't sold, or they're only sold at a huge discount. So they were only made because decisions were being made without data, long in advance, not knowing what the end consumer
Well, that
was
goes
going
with
to
the
buy.
old supply chain models.
The old supply chain model.
They need to change.
Yeah. So we're as for my company KATLA, we are trying to tackle the issues in multiple ways. But this is one of the most distinctive elements about our model is our zero waste manufacturing
That's
policy.
amazing. That's amazing.
So we sell only direct to consumer, and we only manufacture what our consumers either have just bought or just about to buy from us. And most of it is what our consumers have just bought. So we manufacture on demand, fast, in 3 to 5 days, locally in the US.
How could you beat that? I mean,
Well, the goal is to get that down to 1 to 2 days within the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And so the consumer doesn't even feel the difference. And this allows us to not build up any inventory and thereby tackle a very big part of the problem. And I want to show you this tote here.
This is amazing. This is from our First Ladies that
Yes.
Aslaug was also awarded a Goodwill Ambassador for the programs that we'll be doing at Fashion for Development and during the UN GA 77th session.
Yes, which is a huge honor and hopefully
Yes.
a way to really
Well, I
promote
think
this
technology is,
philosophy.
as well as we're talking
Yeah.
about how technology can unlock some of these
Yeah. Exactly.
pipelines.
So this zero waste manufacturing plays into this bag, and this is also a zero waste design, which means that there's no fabric waste. It's designed in a way, because typically there would be about 25% fabric waste. So the pattern gets cut and fabric gets thrown away. Here the pattern is designed in a way that there's no excess fabric. And this is a tracking label. Every item we make has a unique tracking number, And there you can learn about the background of how the item was
I
made.
think that's amazing. I don't know about everyone else, but I would love to know exactly where and when my products or how they were made and who made them.
Yeah.
So this is an amazing opportunity. And people can just use it as a QR code.
So,
As you snap it on your camera?
This is the tracking number. The QR code actually has a different purpose, which is also extremely cool. So one of the problems in the fashion industry is that items lose their relevance to consumers. And they throw them away because they feel like, okay, this isn't new and you know, this isn't cool anymore. What we want to introduce the thinking that items should be worn again and again, and that they continue to have a life, ideally
Right, so
over many years.
there's no end of life.
Yes, there is no end of life. So this QR code delivers new content on a regular basis to the owner of the bag, or their friends. So you can scan this with your camera. If you do that today, you will get a free gifted NFT that we did in collaboration with an Icelandic artist. And if you continue to scan it in a couple of weeks, you'll get different content, and we'll be doing a lot of NFTs for philanthropy.
So it's really not only an addition of information to consumer, but connecting with them on a very, organic level to really start to inform them more about what's happening in the brand.
Yes.
So they kind of feel that super connection.
It's continued engagement with them. Yes, so letting them know who made this. And 80% of the workforce in the industry is women.
Absolutely.
Often they're working in poor conditions. So having this transparency into the supply chain is important to create accountability. But then, how do we make the item fun? And this QR code is one way to do that, to constantly engage, to bundle content into fashion. I think we were the first clothing brand to deliver NFTs directly through fashion.
I think you are, yes. That's amazing.
So we're
I
excited
think
to do
that's
that.
amazing. And so I'm going to take that to technology and innovation and where that's going. And Khaled is kind of heart and soul with me as well. We're both real geeky innovation people. We love the opportunities of what material sciences can also bring into this space. So welcome, Khaled, and I'd love your insight as to where we're going on this journey right now, because it's really changing.
Thank you, Jeanine, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. I want to begin already what I saw in the movies, and it shows me love, trust, sharing, and caring. And especially the first one was staying in my mind.
Oh, the Maya Angelou
Exactly.
alone.
You cannot be alone. We have to stay together. We have to do everything together. There is no time anymore of a fighter for each alone. Especially climate change is coming. It's very obvious. Everybody can understand this, feel it. A lot of people were sweating, I think, meanwhile. And it's not anymore funny to have holidays. I'm coming from Europe, in South European countries. Thank you. I was very happy to see this because it's everything showing us what we have to think about in the future, and this is the beginning of everything. If we don't have, again, these values to stand together and to stick to values once we have taken them in the field, especially about ecological sustainability, the willing of making really research from the A to Z procedure. A means in my field, fashion, luxury fashion, high-end fashion, from the fiber till the end of garment, till the branding, to the end consumer. And this is what then the connection is to the end consumer, what we saw in the beginning in the movies, to understand their lifestyle, to understand their kind of new values, building bridges to the old values. So it's very important to come back to high quality.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how do you see innovation really playing a part? For me, I see this as the unlock, as everyone is talking about the new way and the new vision, from what Paul said with regard to materials to what Aslaug is doing in her business right now with kelp and on-demand production. And you are really, as well, having commitment like me to really unlocking the supply chain capabilities, which, as we know, again, it's not just about the materials, but also the humanity in the supply chain that we also have to care for. as we said, Aslaug, 80% of them are women, and we saw that what the effects of companies walking away from these supply chains can have on also the detriment of these women who have to kind of support their families globally, right? So there's not an easy unlock here, and it takes some time. But how can we unlock some of this innovation and really put it into the business model now so that we can activate change quickly?
It's to find the emotional way to the person or the institution or the companies, the deciders, to make them understand, to convince them to go to these new ways. If I present a new fiber, I have to make understand that from the development of this new fiber is deciding all the quality what's coming after it.
Right,
So a bad fabric is coming from a bad fiber.
right.
So you have to think, and this is a big chance for fashion startups or lifestyle product startups in the future, it's now to begin to think from A to Z a concept. And to go for the new fashion lifestyle will be the luxury sustainability.
Right. So I guess I would go to Paul back again and say, listen, how can we communicate this? How can we start through music, through films that we showcased today, through music that we had over the last 2 days, Diane Warner sending some beautiful music for women's causes. But how do we really connect to the young generations, Gen Z, millennials that are moving up, boomers, well, forget them, but they're connecting in different ways, whether it's TikTok and so on. And maybe the messaging isn't getting to them because you still have this continuation of fast fashion. So what Aslaug is doing is brilliant, but how can we start to really amplify those kind of messages versus what we're seeing on the bad side?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, just to give the audience a sense of what's going on, context-wise, I'm a music producer and DJ. So I DJ large music festivals. I also I've worked with people like Yoko Ono or Wu-Tang Clan, stuff like that. Long story. So let's putting that aside. From my perspective as an artist, half the battle is the imagination. And my motto these days is the imagination is the ultimate renewable resource. So if people can imagine a new path, they can take that path. The problem right now is I firmly believe that we're in a grip of kind of dark money propaganda from so many different eras. The Koch brothers, all sorts of different fossil fuel corporations, the greenwashing effect. And even companies like H&M, for example, they produce so many clothes that that are getting thrown out that they actually have a factory and an electrical generation power plant outside of Stockholm where they burn the clothes to create electricity. And because there's so many clothes, they've actually turned it into fuel, which is kind of really wild. So innovation comes out of need and desire. And when people, for example, there's another famous phrase, I love the audience just kind of riff on this with me here, but there's a phrase where it says, the Stone Age didn't end for lack of stone. I mean, there's still plenty of stone out there.
That's a great one.
It ended because people had better ideas, and they were able to reimagine new approaches to things.
Absolutely.
The 21st century still has the dead hand of the 20th century kind of holding us back a little bit. People still have this idea of infinite scarcity. They always feel like if someone else wins, you lose, a zero-sum game kind of approach. Meanwhile, we all rise if we all share. I'm a big fan of the shareware culture. I'm a big fan of how people are innovating around some of the issues that things like social media, TikTok, and so on. Every time you do a TikTok or an NFT or mint an Ethereum or Bitcoin, you have to imagine the sheer volume of electricity just to make that Bitcoin work, or just to send a post to Facebook, or whatever. These are huge data centers that are being run by, again, fossil fuels. Even if you drive a Tesla, guess what? The electricity comes from the grid. And the grid is still powered by fossil fuel, coal and so on. So these are all things where, personally, I think we're at this really strange pivot moment where individual innovation can actually have massive scalability. And people doing small changes can actually...
Can we pivot quick enough?
Yeah.
I mean, you see now, to what KATLA is doing, they're pivoting and they're moving. I mean, obviously this isn't Aslaug's first rodeo in the business, so she really took the need to understand what was needed, right? So you're working in incredibly new materials in kelp, and tell us a little bit about that journey, because that's super interesting for the rest of us.
Yeah. So I didn't mention the material part yet. So we're extraordinarily excited that we've just introduced in our collection seaweed blends. That was earlier this summer. It's seaweed that comes from the coast of Iceland, which is where I'm originally from, and the brand KATLA draws its kind of creative inspiration from Iceland. But seaweed has the magical qualities of being 20 times more effective at carbon sequestration than land trees. And so there is a lot of opportunity around seaweed to create clothing in a better way. We have actually launched seaweed cultivation in parallel to launching the clothing with seaweed. So we want to put in more than we are taking out. And we are going through a life cycle assessment of our products now to try to understand how we get that balance right, that we can turn the model on its head to actually become a regenerative brand. And there's still a long way to go to get there, but I think that is how we have to start thinking about the industry. We have told people you have to buy less fashion. They aren't buying less fashion.
No, that's the problem we were just talking about
Right.
before,
Yeah.
Paul,
And
right?
then even think about companies like Shein, which is this crazy cheap company where you can just get overnight kind of whatever, and then the price is so
Yeah,
cheap.
I mean, if
know.
if a coffee is more expensive than a T-shirt, I mean, we definitely have a problem, right? I mean, we have to think to ourselves, like, there's got to be something wrong with this.
There are major issues in the supply chain if you're selling a product at that price. That someone is bearing unfair risk there. And
all
they're-
of us are because of the amount of quantity that's coming in. But Shein, they'll argue that they're doing on demand and they're direct to consumer. So, but the sheer amount and the costs, I cannot imagine that people in kind of the social aspect of it are being utilized in the correct way. So I think one of the interesting parts we can also talk about is where do we see the future of automation and kind of, how we cultivate new materials in this space to really kind of unlock the norms, right? So we're used to a polyester. And obviously, we've seen how bad polyester is in the world. I mean, we see the oceans. We know that we're drinking it. We know that it's all over us. Cotton, it's an amazing natural fiber, but it's also sometimes, depending on where, not all, are kind of water-intensive usage and also pesticides that need to be done. We talked about hemp earlier. We were just kind of, chatting around amongst ourselves. Hemp is an amazing, but it's not being utilized in the commodity space. And that's another thing. Like, cotton is a commodity. Petroleum is a commodity. Where do we see the future of some of these materials to take their place or to eliminate or get rid of some of these things? Do you have any thoughts on that, Khaled?
Yes, it's a very complex story. It's in fact a story of effect and cause. So for example, cotton, you mentioned cotton. One T-shirt, you use 8 to 10,000 liters for one T-shirt.
Yes.
Okay, then I don't speak about the forest which is disappearing because of monocultures, or lakes are disappearing because it needs a lot of water. That's because, in my opinion, cotton should be a luxury product, seen as a luxury product.
A luxury product,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
More on the similar idea as we see, cashmere
Exactly.
or some fine silks, right?
Yes. So, for example, cashmere.
Amazing.
Another point. Cashmere is normally a very noble quality material, but they are bad and good quality. And bad quality is mostly used by the big companies.
Yeah.
You was naming it.
Yes, that they can't seem to
Exactly.
pivot like everyone else,
And then it's becoming all the time cause effect thing. For example, it's a bad yarn, cashmere yarn, then a bad fabric, a bad garment, which is destroyed after, let's say, I exaggerate now, after 2 weeks and throwing away.
Yes.
So why not beginning from the beginning with a good quality of fiber, cashmere fiber, with a good weaver, with a good garment maker, and then you have an item for life. You have an item which you can make a heritage
Yes.
to your son or to your daughter. So this is the thinking which is important.
Well, I mean, I don't know about this, some people in the ages, but I saw some people who, when Dr. Dorsey said 1930s, understood Eleanor Roosevelt wearing trousers, but you know, when we all grew up, it wasn't disposable. You know, you really paid and you saved your money to get the goods that you wanted, and you used it, and it was hand-me-downs, you know?
Exactly.
I
It's
mean,
a
you buy the
value
thing for
again.
life, right?
It's a value again.
And
Yeah.
Khaled, to kind of riff on what you were just saying, by the way, all of us have enough clothing to last us for the rest of our lives. If you never bought a new piece of clothing again,
That's
you would be fine. You don't need new clothes. But there's an incredible amount of coercive propaganda at every level to get people to continuously buy. And that's part of your identity in a late capitalist structure. And you're continuously incentivized to continuously consume, and because that's how people make money.
Yeah, but don't you think
need
the
anything.
social media and all of the pressures that these young generations feel, like it's TikTok, they're going through millions of like reels a day, and they feel the pressure to want to have to change this. You know, will the future of avatars take the place of someone actually wearing that? I don't know. I mean, as a brand leader, I mean, where do you see your vision going there?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, as I said earlier, I think we have to figure out a way to flip the model on its head, that we can create fashion without being so destructive. So that's one
Yes.
part of it. But I do think that, thankfully, we're starting to see on social media some trends toward people being proud of wearing things again. And, you know, I'm wearing this for the third day in a row. I'm wearing this for the fourth day in a row.
Right.
And vintage has become more and more
It's
popular.
amazing. We saw the great show that they had yesterday, New York Vintage and Bonnie Young yesterday.
Yes. So thankfully, I think the younger generation is starting to think about that more, and in some cases that is replacing their fast fashion purchases. Not enough yet, but and I do think that avatars and
Yes.
virtual garments will also help. I think we're in the very early days of that. But if people are thinking about looking good on social media, it don't have to be real clothes.
No, they don't.
You can create clothes.
And maybe that's where some
Yeah.
of the creativity can really go, right? I mean, they can unlock their own inner, where like customization and you know, sneakers and with Nike and all of the new things that are happening out there. Maybe it is to be this different, right? It's the only way to create us to look so different, because you know, you go to parties and you don't want to buy something on the high street, because at the same time everyone could be wearing the same that one fashion item at the same event. Sorry, Khaled, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's people and the founders like Aslaug, I find very, very strong, wonderful that they're beginning till today and today
From the
with
beginning
a
to
new
start
brand
this
from
journey the
the
right way.
Exactly, it's important. Before it was, we don't need the clothing. It's reality. We all need. We like it, you know. I speak about all the time the skins. We have our skin, it's organic. We have a skin on the skin with our clothing. We have a skin interior design, because it's another discipline I'm doing. It's a house, it's protection. It's belonging to us, and so we need this. So this is reality. Now we have to deal how to deal with this reality. So we can make it, surely not from today till tomorrow, 100% change. Everything is good. This is
Right.
a dream, vision. But we can step by step, in any step level of production. Now I'm coming back to the design. As a designer, I have to be responsible. This is what is missing.
Okay.
My people, more and more, they're not responsible anymore. Perhaps because they were forced not to have any more these values. That were becoming corrupt, okay, because of fast fashion, of fast money making, oppressed by the marketing people, by the business people.
Right.
If
So
there's
we
an
kind of
understanding,
devalued the whole system
exactly,
in general.
it had
right?
to be
Yeah.
on every step. You have to come back to values. You have to come to what you promise. You have to hold it. I've found this wonderful with Aslaug's brand using seaweed. Seaweed is a cellulosic procedure. It's 100% biodegradable. It's 50% absorption, means less water by washing, less water by dyeing,
it's amazing.
and so on. I come from the development team of
Well, everyone
lyocell
can see
tensor.
at KATLA.com.
So it's all related already in the beginning. If
And
you
check
make
out
attention.
Aslaug's QR coded traceability. I'm going to ask you guys to have just a really quick ending and wrap-up session here. We're leaving this crew. We're fashion, films. We have the whole afternoon on social causes, and so many important things are happening alongside what the UNGA is hoping to do this week. I'm going to give it to you, Paul. Wrap it up and give us what your take is and what you wish for to come out of this week.
Okay, well, first and foremost, just us being here is a catalyzing moment. I'm sure almost everyone in the audience feels that there's a tremendous amount of possibility right now. The problem is that we have the legacy of this sort of 20th century psychology of scarcity, and thus getting people to think about profit from that scarcity. There's also, I mean, when Elsa was talking about algae and kelp, there's also mushrooms, incredible innovation going with mushroom materials. There's incredible innovation going on with bamboo, actually, Khaled. Bamboo is one of the strongest materials. It's stronger than steel, and you can eat it. If you go to Asia, you'll see whole skyscrapers made out of the siding of bamboo. And it pulls down a tremendous amount of carbon out of the air. So algae, mushrooms, bamboo, and then hemp. Hemp is an incredibly
So
strong
the materials
material.
for
Yeah.
sure.
So all of those, there's no silver bullet. There's not one stop-shop solution here, but it's about complexity. And I think just getting together and how people sort of exchanging ideas is part of the process of rethinking the near future of
I
fashion.
hope people come back to the films again to be inspired. Aslaug, wrap us up here.
Yes, so I think it's important, we've highlighted a lot of problems here, but let's remember that there are solutions. We can make a difference. We can turn this around. A lot of it's about mindset, technology, and then systems innovation. The fashion industry has been tremendously slow to change. It's decades behind other industries in terms of systems innovation, but we can change this, and we need to all take responsibility, whether we are part of the industry trying to come up with solutions or we are consumers. Consumers need to put pressure on brands. They need to understand where their garments come from, and they need to start buying clothing that lasts.
So educating our consumer and really fiercely getting that message across.
Yeah.
Khaled, one little sentence. We are really tight on time now.
Yeah, I know you're afraid I'm speaking again. About Paul, mushroom imitation leather, you need all the time 20% of plastic too, for form stability and quality.
Not all. There are some out there. I'm going to tell you. I've just been studying this biotech sector.
Okay,
so.
biotech, we have the bacteria solutions, because already in artificial skins we have this bacteria-built material. And now there is
Science
a lot.
Might get us out of this again.
Exactly, going to the sneakers, 100% degradable because made of this bacterial cellulosic. Yeah, so it's a wonderful way. Crisis or pandemic were pushing the people in front, and we have not to forget. We have to continue to push it because I'm a little afraid it's a trend, and the trend is good. Now we have to take it, this wave, to go on this trend.
Right.
But the danger is that again, business leader and marketing departments are using this trend till the end, till the trend is finished, and then what is happening later.
Right, so no more greenwashing, and we need to get out to consumers. Listen, guys, I want to wrap that today. I want to say thank you again for your valuable time and your content. Thank you, everybody.